content is the easiest thing when it comes to copywriting, and in fact is a trap that keeps you from more sales and better profits. I'm Justin Hitt from Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. As a copywriter, you have systems and methods that make writing copy easy, and that's a real problem. Understand that what I'm sharing with you right now is a secret that folks will not talk about, especially since those who advocate content marketing are really selling services that you use to do content marketing. It's kind of like the circular shovel seller in the gold rush. It is very easy to create content. Like right now, I'm simply having a conversation with my avatar, you in the audience, and I'm saying, look, I know you can write copy. I know you've got draft sales letters in place, but you don't have customers. You don't have clients. And it's going to take you focusing your content efforts on an audience who can make a buying decision in order for you to get to the next level. Now, it's a different story as a copywriter, marketer, or business development professional if you have people writing content for clients and the client wants the content to be done. The danger is when the client realizes that content alone doesn't create leads or attract customers. Now, content gives us a false belief that if you just write it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. And that's a pitch sometimes. Hey, look, if you had a website that has these 15 things and does this SEO, then customers will magically manifest and your bank account will overflow. And sweet Jesus, you will be at the next level when it comes to your business. You know, it's almost like there's a faith-based, a religious perspective to the copywriting and, content marketing and SEO and all these different aspects of online marketing. But the truth of it is, if you can compile a list of 100 buyers in a marketplace, write them a letter or a series of letters, you can ask them for them to raise their hand with additional interest in what you have to offer. And maybe it's because I've had a lot of business-to-business experience that I'm a little jaded when it comes to the online world. Please understand that most people who are online, including many of the listeners to this podcast, are simply filling up time, searching for answers, and not doing anything. See, that's why it's called a search engine. It's not called a find answers engine. It's called a search engine because the more you search, the more ads they can display in front of you. You know, it's called news, not answers, because the news is what happens in between the commercials. See, content is easy. You can fill up volumes of web pages with content. You can write a journal every day. You can do a podcast every day, but it doesn't guarantee you'll have prospects. Now, here's something interesting that I do with my podcast, for example, is I'll do these topics. I might get a letter or an email from a reader, and I'll answer it in a podcast format, but I'll design the podcast to be specific to a handful of individuals, and then I will send a postcard to those individuals. I might send them an email. I might write an email to the overall list and say, oh, by the way, we just covered why content doesn't matter. And how content's the easiest part. And what really matters is lead generation and sales. And so I'll send that email to the broader list, and those people who click on the link, then I'll offer them something related to the click on a link. Now, there will be times that you'll use content in order to maintain the connection with a prospect, because Lord knows when they go online, there's a lot of information to choose from. Much of that information is false, but the education level of the reader is they don't know it's false. Like they haven't tested it, so they don't know it's false. So this is kind of a mixed message. Content's easy to produce. You can produce it for customers, and they will pay you to create it. But also, content alone doesn't work. So if you want to really serve your clients, you need to help them understand that it's just writing it doesn't do anything. Now, what's easier than writing content is actually getting interviewed by other people who are creating content and then pointing your customers to their interview of you, for example, the news coverage. You know, you can write a press release to get interviewed by a newspaper. But ultimately, you got to make an offer. So this all goes back to direct response. If you're going to write it, it needs to have an offer. If you're going to make an offer, it needs to have a time frame. It needs to have a value proposition. It needs to get them to raise their hand and do something. Once they've raised their hand and identify themselves, then you follow up with that in a means that is relevant, it is useful. I use the questions. You'd be surprised how few questions I get. But when I do get questions, I can meaningfully engage the individual to create a kind of a cluster of information that I can then put out in front of other people with an offer tied to it. So you probably get a little soft response. You send in a question and I give you a reply back. We might chat back and forth on email, or I might get your feedback in another means. But essentially you get something and move forward. Why recycle all that information, all those resources? I create podcasts. I create lead generation pieces like the magnetic marketing series that Dan Kennedy teaches, and I send it to my list of people who can buy. See, I figured this out when I was getting a lot of visitors to my website, but no sales. And then I dug down to realize who these visitors were, and the majority of them were college students. They were not people who can buy. I looked into it, and there is a handful of people who could buy. I researched out their companies. Then I found out who their peers were using LinkedIn. And then I sent letters to them and other people that are their peers. And then I got sales. So again, content alone does nothing. Content is not king. Okay, cash is king. Free net cash flow is king. And the only way you're going to get to cash or free net cash flow is to have customers. Now, you don't just get the customer to create the transaction. You want the relationship with the customer, because after you've invested all that money into getting the customer, you want to keep them long enough that you can at least break even. But again, if you're delivering a high amount of value, which I hope I'm doing with this podcast, you can help that customer go to the next level. Rather than them doing business with you and you're writing copy for them, then they realize the copy's not working. And then they say, well, maybe it's not the copy, because their faith is that copy is king. They say, well, maybe it's not the copy. Maybe it's the copywriter. Well, if you've never let them know about direct response, if you've never shared with them the value of getting a reader to take action and self-identify themselves and to qualify themselves and to get into some kind of funnel so that you can make an offer, well, then yes, they're gonna judge you on the dollar value of the content. They're gonna say, well, you're charging $5 for an article. I can get somebody in India to make a $2.50 article. You're charging $1,000 for a sales letter. Oh my gosh, I got this sales letter formula kit for $4.95. I can just do it myself. You got to educate them on value. Now, you don't do that by writing a lot more content. You do that by getting an interaction back and forth. You invite them to an event. You teach them. You show them. You set up the value proposition. You essentially use lead generation and sales offers. But they will stop judging you on price alone. They will stop blaming you for the problems of their bad methodology. And then you can start shifting into campaign development. You'll have a better idea of the qualification of the individual because you've had some kind of interaction with them. And in the long run, you'll build a business rather than just being a content monkey and just putting out that next article. And I understand how it works in the business opportunity world. Somebody gets on and says, if you want to be recognized online as an expert, all you've got to do is daily podcasts. And then every podcast, you have it transcribed. Then you take the transcription and you break it up into articles. And now you've got one podcast a day and you've got 5 articles. Well, that's when people have more time than sense. If you got sense, you simply survey an audience and find out what they want to know about, what kind of decisions they make, what can they buy, and then you create what they want and you tell them about it. But when you tell them about it, you get them to raise their hand and tell you that they're interested in buying it. It's sales and marketing. Content alone does nothing for your business. Only sales and marketing can transform individuals' desires into a relevant product or service in which they invest to solve specific problems. I'm going to leave you with that because that was so powerful and useful if you will apply it. And again, people are screwing around on the internet, reading content, watching YouTube. I find myself doing it sometimes. I'll just open YouTube and just what's on my playlist? Like if I'm looking for something, I can go to there's a Business Advantage. I got a couple subscriptions and mastermind programs that I've invested in. If I want answers, I can grab a book off the shelf in my office. But social media has trained us to be compulsive. Websites have trained us to search. And ultimately, you're going to end up with a bunch of bad leads. Now, the good news is that you'll know they're bad leads and you can target, but the majority of the folks on the internet have been trained to get free stuff. This is what transforms your business. You'll start going direct to buyers. Those buyers will engage you. You'll have a cycle for understanding those buyers. You'll write better marketing and create more sales. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. If you have questions about this or anything I've covered, write me with your questions. Fax your questions in. Be as detailed as you like. The more you invest in asking a good question that's going to help you solve problems, the more I'll invest in getting you the answers you need to solve those problems. That exchange is more valuable than thousands of pages of content that I've already written, and very often I'm recycling or I'm reusing because it's evergreen. The things that make you successful as a copywriter, marketer, or business development professional is using the things that generate leads and create sales. That is what you're here for. Thanks for listening. Ask your questions at www.insidestrategicrelations.com. Scratch. Wrong website, guys. Hey, this is my fourth podcast I've recorded this morning. Ask your questions at www.adbriefings.co.uk, where we help you transform words into sales, ideas into influence. Thanks for listening.